When Omega Mira finds the pack's most feared alpha commander dying from silver poisoning in the forest, her single act of mercy, sharing her water, sets off a chain reaction that brings an entire army to her doorstep the very next day. Now, Commander Kael Thornwick stands before her cottage with hundreds of warriors, claiming she saved not just his life, but awakened a bond that could either elevate her to unimaginable power or destroy everything she's ever known. But when an alpha owes his life to an omega, who really holds the power? The old woman's scream cut through the morning air like a knife through silk. Mira dropped her water bucket and ran toward the sound, her bare feet slapping against the wet grass. Behind the omega housing, she found Mrs. Chen pointing at the tree line with a shaking finger. "Blood trail," the elderly woman whispered, "leading straight into our territory." Mira's nose picked up the scent immediately, metallic and wrong, mixed with something that made her wolf pace nervously inside her chest. The crimson drops led deeper into the forest, away from the safety of their small settlement. Every omega knew the rules. Stay close to home, never wander alone, and definitely never follow mysterious blood trails into the woods. But something about this felt different, urgent. "Go back inside," Mira told Mrs. Chen gently. "I'll check it out." "Child, you can't. What if it's a trap?" The possibility had crossed Mira's mind, but her instincts were pulling her forward like an invisible rope. She grabbed her water bottle from the dropped bucket and started following the trail. Each step took her further from everything familiar and safe. The morning mist hung thick between the ancient pine trees, making everything look ghostly and strange. Mira moved quietly, the way her grandmother had taught her when she was small, heel to toe, avoiding the dry branches that would snap and give her away. The blood drops were getting bigger now, more frequent. Whatever was hurt was getting worse. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she climbed over a fallen log. The scent was stronger here, mixed with something sharp and bitter that made her nose wrinkle. She'd smelled it once before, years ago, when old Henrik had been attacked by rogues, silver poisoning. But that was impossible. No one used silver weapons anymore. The peace treaty between packs had banned them decades ago. A soft groan made her freeze. 20 feet ahead, behind the massive oak tree that marked the border between territories, something moved. Mira crept closer, her wolf now fully alert and ready to run. What she saw made her gasp out loud. A man lay crumpled against the tree trunk like a broken doll. His clothes were torn and bloody, his dark hair matted with dirt and worse things. But even unconscious and damaged, she knew exactly who he was. Everyone in the territory knew that face. It had been carved into statues, painted on the pack house walls, whispered about in both fear and admiration. Commander Kael Thornwick, the Alpha Prime's brother. The wolf who had never lost a single battle in 15 years of warfare. The living legend who could supposedly kill 10 men with his bare hands, and he was dying. Silver burns covered his arms and chest, the metal eating away at his supernatural healing like acid. His breathing was shallow and wrong. His usually perfect posture crumpled in defeat. Mira had never seen an alpha look so human. She should run, should get help from the warrior wolves who knew how to handle these situations. Should definitely not approach the most dangerous predator in 3 territories while he was wounded and unpredictable. Instead, she found herself kneeling beside him, her small hands hovering over his injuries without quite touching. Up close, he looked younger than in the official portraits. Maybe only a few years older than her own 22. There were laugh lines around his eyes that the artists never included, and a small scar on his chin that spoke of childhood accidents rather than glorious battles. "Hey," she whispered, touching his shoulder carefully. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened, storm gray and unfocused with pain. For a moment, he just stared at her like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then recognition flickered across his features, followed immediately by something that looked almost like embarrassment. "Omega." His voice was rough as sandpaper, barely more than a croak, not dismissive or commanding like she'd expected, just tired. "Don't try to talk," Mira said, unscrewing the cap on her water bottle. "You're badly hurt." He tried to sit up and immediately fell back with a pained grunt. "Shouldn't be here. Dangerous." "For who? You're the one bleeding all over my territory." That got her a look, sharp and assessing despite his condition. "Your territory? Well, technically, the Alpha Prime's territory. But I live here, so—" She shrugged, holding the water bottle to his cracked lips. "Drink. You're dehydrated." For a second, she thought he might refuse. Pride, maybe. Or Alpha, stubbornness. Then survival instinct took over and he drank greedily, his throat working as he swallowed every drop she offered. When the bottle was empty, he closed his eyes and let out a shaky breath. "Better?" she asked. "Much." He studied her face with new interest. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but Mira answered anyway. "Should I be? Most people are." She considered this, looking at his powerful frame and the scars that crisscrossed his exposed skin. Evidence of 100 fights, 1,000 victories. But right now, hurt and vulnerable, he just seemed like someone who needed help. "Most people haven't found you dying under a tree," she said finally. Changes the perspective a bit. Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Fair point. In the distance, voices were calling his name. The search parties had finally found his trail. Relief and disappointment warred in Mira's chest. Relief that he'd be safe. Disappointment that this strange, quiet moment would end. "They're coming for you," she said unnecessarily. Yes, but he made no move to call out to them, to end his suffering any faster. "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. In all her 22 years, no Alpha had ever asked her name. She was just Omega, or girl, or sometimes nothing at all. Invisible until needed for cooking or cleaning or other menial tasks. "Mira," she said, the word feeling strange and important in the morning air. "Mira," he repeated, like he was testing how it sounded. I know who you are." "Do you?" He tilted his head slightly. "Who am I then?" The voices were getting closer. Soon the forest would be full of warriors and medics and all the chaos that followed the Alpha Prime's brother, wherever he went. But for now, it was just the two of them in this bubble of morning mist and impossible quiet. "You're the commander," she said. "The unbeatable warrior. The Alpha Prime's right hand." And Mira looked at him, really looked, taking in the vulnerability in his eyes, the way he'd trusted her enough to drink from her bottle, the careful gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her. "And you're someone who says, thank you." This time the smile was real, transforming his entire face. "Yes, thank you, Mira." The first warriors burst through the underbrush then, their relief palpable as they spotted their fallen commander. But as they rushed forward with medical supplies and worried voices, Kael's eyes stayed fixed on hers. "I won't forget this," he said quietly, "just for her." Then the moment shattered as trained soldiers took over, lifting him carefully and barking orders about silver antidotes and emergency protocols. Mira melted back into the trees, suddenly invisible again, as they focused entirely on their precious cargo. But as she walked home through the lifting mist, she could still feel those gray eyes on her skin like a brand. The army arrived like thunder rolling across the valley. Mira heard them long before she saw them. The synchronized beating of hundreds of horses' hooves, the clink of armor and weapons, voices calling out orders in sharp military precision. She stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, watching the impossible sight unfold before her tiny cottage. Row after row of dark uniformed soldiers spread across the meadow like spilled ink. Their horses were massive war breeds, bred for battle and intimidation. Banners snapped in the morning breeze, displaying the Thornwick pack's silver wolf on a field of midnight blue. At the center of it all, mounted on a horse that looked more like a small dragon than anything that should exist in nature, sat Commander Kael Thornwick. He looked nothing like the broken man she'd found under the oak tree. His uniform was crisp and perfect, his posture radiating the kind of authority that made seasoned warriors drop their eyes. The silver burns were gone, healed by the pack's best medics. Even from this distance, she could feel the power rolling off him in waves. Mira set down her coffee with hands that only trembled slightly. 3 days. It had been 3 days since their encounter in the forest, and she'd almost convinced herself it was some kind of strange dream. Apparently not. A knock at her door made her jump. Not the heavy pounding she'd expect from soldiers, but a polite, measured rap that somehow seemed more terrifying than any amount of aggressive banging. She smoothed her simple blue dress and tried to calm her racing heart before opening the door. Pack leader Aldrich stood on her front porch, his graying beard neatly trimmed and his brown eyes sharp with intelligence. Behind him, she could see at least 20 warriors arranged in a loose semicircle around her cottage. Not threatening, exactly, but definitely not casual either. "Miss Caldwell," Aldrich said politely, "might we have a word?" Mira's throat felt dry as dust. "Of course, pack leader. Would you like to come in?" "That's very kind, but I think the commander would prefer to speak with you outside." She followed him out onto the small wooden porch that her grandfather had built with his own hands 50 years ago. It felt surreal to see it surrounded by the most elite fighting force in the Northern Territories, like finding a tea party in the middle of a battlefield. Commander Thornwick dismounted with fluid grace and approached her cottage. Every step was controlled, purposeful. The walk of a predator who knew exactly how dangerous he was. But when he reached the porch and looked up at her, she saw something familiar flicker in those storm-gray eyes. "Miss Caldwell," he said formally. "Commander." She tried to match his tone, though her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Pack leader Aldrich cleared his throat. "The commander has informed us that you provided aid when he was injured 3 days ago." "I gave him some water," Mira said carefully. "He was dehydrated." Several of the warriors exchanged glances. Apparently, there was more to the story than simple first aid. "Water," Aldrich repeated. "And you removed silver fragments from his wounds." Mira blinked in confusion. "I didn't remove anything. I wouldn't have known how." Commander Thornwick stepped closer to the porch, and she caught his scent. Cedar and steel, and something wild that made her wolf stir restlessly. "What exactly do you remember about our encounter?" She thought back to that misty morning, trying to recall every detail. "You were hurt. Silver poisoning, I think. I gave you my water bottle and waited until the search parties found you. And during this time, did you touch my injuries at all?" Maybe. I was checking to see how bad they were." She looked between the two men, feeling like she was missing something important. "Why? Did I do something wrong?" The commander and pack leader exchanged a look that was full of meaning she couldn't interpret. "Miss Caldwell," Aldrich said slowly, "when we found the commander, his silver wounds were already beginning to heal. The fragments had been drawn out of his system. In 15 years of warfare, we've never seen anything like it." "That's impossible. I don't have healing abilities." "No," Commander Thornwick agreed. "You don't. But you do have something else." The weight of all those watching eyes was making her feel dizzy. "I don't understand." "Your touch neutralized the silver," he said simply. "It's a gift that appears perhaps once in a generation. Always in omegas. Always rare enough that most people consider it a myth." Mira sank down onto the porch step, her legs suddenly unsteady. "That's not real. I would know if I could do something like that." "Would you?" Aldrich asked gently. "How often do you encounter silver poisoning? How often do you touch wounded alphas?" "Never." The answer was never, because omegas didn't associate with warriors, and definitely didn't go around putting their hands on injured pack leaders. The hierarchies were too strict, the social barriers too high. "I don't believe it," she whispered. Commander Thornwick crouched down so they were at eye level, his voice dropping to that same gentle tone he'd used in the forest. "Mira, look at me." She lifted her eyes to his, struck again by how different he looked up close. Less marble statue, more flesh and blood person with complications and contradictions. 3 days ago I was dying, he said quietly. Silver poisoning that advanced should have killed me within hours, even with medical intervention. But the moment you touched me, I could feel the poison leaving my system. I could breathe again, think clearly again. But I didn't do anything special. You saved my life. The simple statement hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Okay, she said finally. Let's say that's true. Let's say I somehow helped you heal. What does that have to do with? She gestured at the army surrounding her house. All of this? Pack leader Aldrich stepped forward again. The Alpha Prime would like to meet with you to discuss your unique situation. Panic fluttered in Mira's chest like a trapped bird. I can't meet with the Alpha Prime. I'm just an Omega. There are protocols, hierarchies, which become somewhat irrelevant when said Omega saves the life of the Alpha Prime's brother and heir. Commander Thornwick said dryly. I'm not political, Mira said desperately. I don't know anything about pack business or warfare or whatever it is you people do all day. I work in the gardens. I help with the children sometimes. I read books and drink too much coffee, and that's it. That's my whole life. Not anymore, the commander said. And something in his tone made her look at him more sharply. What do you mean? He straightened to his full height. Once again, every inch the legendary warrior. But his eyes stayed gentle, almost apologetic. I mean that everything changed the moment you chose to help me instead of walking away, he said. Like it or not, you're part of something bigger now. I didn't choose anything. You just saw someone in pain and decided to help, even though it could have gotten you killed. His smile was sad and proud at the same time. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? Mira felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Her quiet, simple life was disappearing before her eyes, replaced by something vast and complicated that she didn't understand. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. What if I just want to go back to my garden and my books? Commander Thornwick and Pack Leader Aldrich exchanged another look. I'm afraid that's no longer an option, Aldrich said gently. Word is already spreading about what happened. Other packs will want to know more about your abilities. Some will see you as a valuable asset. Others. He trailed off meaningfully. Others will see me as a threat, Mira finished. Yes. She looked around at the sea of warriors, finally understanding. They weren't here to intimidate her or drag her away. They were here to protect her. Because in saving Commander Thornwick's life, she'd painted a target on her own back. So what happens now? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Commander Thornwick held out his hand to her, palm up. An invitation, not a command. Now you come with us, he said simply. And we figure out what comes next together. Mira stared at his offered hand for a long moment, knowing that taking it would change everything forever. Behind her was the safety of obscurity, the comfort of her small, predictable world. Ahead was uncertainty, danger, and complications she couldn't even imagine. But there was also something else in those storm-gray eyes, something that looked almost like hope. She took his hand and let him help her to her feet, sealing her fate with that simple touch. The army began to move. The silver blade whistled past Mira's ear, embedding itself deep into the oak tree behind her, with a violent thud that made her heart slam against her ribs. She spun around, muddy boots slipping on the wet leaves, to find 3 rogues emerging from the morning shadows, like nightmares given form. Well, well, the largest one sneered, his yellow eyes gleaming with hunger. The little Omega who thinks she can play hero. Mira's wolf cowered inside her chest, recognizing the scent of madness that clung to these outcasts like smoke. Rogues were wolves who had been cast out from their packs, left to wander without the bonds that kept their beasts sane. They were dangerous in ways that made even alphas nervous. I don't want any trouble, she said, slowly backing toward the creek where she'd saved Kael just yesterday. Her voice sounded small and fragile in the thick air. Too late for that, sweetheart. The second rogue, a woman with scars covering half her face, stepped closer. You messed with pack business. Made our job harder. Mira's mind raced. What job? The third rogue, barely more than a teenager, giggled in a way that made her skin crawl. Killing the big bad commander, of course. But you went and ruined everything with your good deed. Ice flooded Mira's veins. These weren't random rogues. They were assassins. Someone had hired them to murder Kael, and her saving him had destroyed their carefully planned attack. Who sent you? She demanded, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Someone who pays very, very well, the scarred woman purred. Someone who doesn't like it when little Omegas interfere with pack politics. The leader lunged without warning, his claws extended and aiming for her throat. Mira threw herself sideways, landing hard on her shoulder as his claws raked the air where her head had been. She rolled behind a fallen log, her heart beating so fast she could barely think. You can't hide forever, little mouse, the teenager called out in a sing-song voice. We've got all day to play. But Mira wasn't planning to hide. She was planning to run. Her bare feet found purchase on the slippery rocks of the creek, and she splashed through the shallow water as fast as her legs could carry her. The rogues howled behind her, the sound echoing off the trees like the cry of hunting beasts. She knew these woods better than anyone. Every fallen branch, every rabbit trail, every place where the ground turned soft and dangerous. The rogues were faster and stronger, but they didn't know the land like she did. She led them through a patch of thick brambles that tore at their clothes and skin, buying herself precious seconds. Smart little thing. She heard the leader grunt as he crashed through the thorns behind her, but not smart enough. Mira's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, leaping over a small ravine and landing in a crouch on the other side. The pack compound was still miles away, too far to reach before the rogues caught her. But there was another option, the old watchtower that sat on the ridge above the forest. She changed direction, her feet finding the narrow deer path that wound up the hillside. The rogues fell behind slightly as the terrain grew steeper, their city-soft paws struggling on the loose stones. But they were still coming, still hunting. The watchtower appeared through the trees like salvation, its stone walls covered in ivy and moss. It had been abandoned for decades, but the structure was still solid. More importantly, it had something the rogues wouldn't expect, a horn that could be heard for miles. Mira burst through the rotting wooden door and took the spiral stairs 3 at a time, her legs shaking with exhaustion. The horn sat on a rusty stand near the window, tarnished with age but still functional. She grabbed it with both hands, just as the rogues crashed through the door below. The sound that erupted from the horn was deep and mournful, rolling across the forest like thunder. It was the ancient call for help, the sound that every wolf knew meant danger. She blew it again and again until her vision started to blur from lack of oxygen. Clever girl, the leader said from the doorway, no longer bothering to hurry. But help won't arrive in time. The scarred woman appeared beside him, twirling a silver dagger between her fingers. Should we make it quick or have some fun first? Fun, the teenager giggled, bounding up the stairs like a excited puppy. Definitely fun. Mira backed against the window, the horn clutched to her chest like a shield. The morning sun streamed through the glass behind her, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. She could hear the distant sound of hoofbeats. Help was coming, but not fast enough. Last chance, she said, lifting her chin with more courage than she felt. Leave now, and I won't tell them who hired you. The rogues exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Oh, you sweet little thing, the scarred woman crooned. You still think this is about you? What do you mean? The leader's smile was all teeth and malice. This was never about killing you, Omega. You're just bait. The truth hit her like a physical blow. The attack on Kael yesterday hadn't been random. It had been planned. And now they were using her as bait to draw him out again, knowing he would come running to save the Omega who had saved him. He won't fall for it, she said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. Won't he? The teenager pulled out a small mirror and angled it to catch the sunlight, sending a bright flash across the forest. We've already sent the signal. Your knight in shining armor is riding straight into our trap. The hoofbeats were getting closer now, accompanied by the howls of hunting wolves. Mira's heart soared and sank at the same time. Help was coming, but it was exactly what the rogues wanted. You see, the scarred woman explained conversationally, our employer learned something interesting about the great Commander Thornwick. Seems he's developed a soft spot for helpless little omegas. Makes him predictable. Vulnerable, the leader added with satisfaction. Stupid. The teenager giggled. Mira gripped the horn tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Through the window, she could see riders approaching through the trees. Kael in the lead, his black horse flying over fallen logs and streams. Behind him rode a dozen pack warriors, their faces grim with determination. He's not stupid, she said quietly. He's brave. Same thing, really. The scarred woman shrugged. Dead is dead. But as the riders drew closer, Mira noticed something that made hope flutter in her chest. Kael wasn't charging blindly into danger like the rogues expected. He was moving with purpose, his warriors spreading out in a careful formation that spoke of military training and tactical thinking. The rogues noticed too. Their confident smiles began to fade as they realized their prey might not be as helpless as they'd assumed. Something's wrong, the leader muttered, moving to the window. He's supposed to come alone. Maybe he's smarter than you thought, Mira suggested sweetly. The sound of arrows whistling through the air made them all duck instinctively. The pack warriors had surrounded the tower, cutting off any escape route. Shouts echoed from below as more wolves arrived, their voices carrying the authority of trained soldiers rather than desperate rescuers. This isn't how it was supposed to go, the teenager whined, all his earlier excitement gone. The scarred woman grabbed Mira by the arm, her claws digging into skin. Doesn't matter, we still have the bait. Let her go! Kael's voice boomed from directly below the tower, carrying the unmistakable command of an alpha who expected to be obeyed without question. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine at the raw power in that single demand, but the rogues only laughed in response. Oh, we'll let her go, the scarred woman called back, dragging Mira to the window so Kael could see them clearly, right after she takes a little flight. The drop from the tower window to the ground below was at least 30 feet, enough to kill even a shifter if they landed wrong. Mira's stomach lurched as the woman forced her to lean over the stone sill, her feet barely touching the floor. Down in the clearing, Kael sat motionless on his huge black horse, but even from this distance, Mira could see the tension in every line of his body. His warriors had formed a perfect circle around the tower, their weapons drawn and ready, but they couldn't attack without risking her life. What do you want? Kael shouted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. What we've always wanted, the leader called back. You dead. Then take me instead. Let the Omega go. Now where's the fun in that? The teenager had recovered his giggles. Bouncing on his toes like this was all a wonderful game. We like our plan better. Mira caught sight of movement in the trees beyond the clearing. More wolves, moving through the shadows like ghosts. Pack reinforcements were arriving by the minute, but the rogues seemed oblivious to the growing danger surrounding them. You're outnumbered, she told them quietly. There's nowhere to run. Who says we want to run? The scarred woman's grip tightened on her arm. Sometimes the best revenge is mutual destruction. A chill ran through Mira as she realized what the woman meant. These rogues didn't care about escaping. They were here for a suicide mission, planning to take as many pack wolves with them as possible. Someone had paid them not just to kill Kael, but to start a war. Who hired you? She demanded. What pack wants him dead badly enough to sacrifice you? The leader's yellow eyes glittered with malice. Wouldn't you like to know, little hero? Maybe you'll figure it out before you hit the ground. But before anyone could move, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. I think that's quite enough. The voice came from the stairwell behind them, smooth and cultured, and completely unexpected. The rogues spun around, weapons raised, to find themselves facing a woman in an elegant blue dress who looked utterly out of place in the abandoned tower. "Lady Evelyn," the leader breathed, his face going pale. "You're supposed to be miles away with a perfect alibi?" The woman smiled, but there was nothing warm about the expression. Yes, that was the original plan. But plans change. Mira stared at the newcomer in confusion. She'd never seen her before. But something about the woman's bearing screamed nobility. This was someone important. Someone with power and money and influence. "You're the one who hired them," Mira realized aloud. Lady Evelyn inclined her head gracefully. "Guilty as charged. Though I must say, they've made rather a mess of what should have been a simple assassination." "Why?" The word tore from Mira's throat. "Why do you want Kael dead?" "Because he's in my way." The lady moved closer, her silk shoes making no sound on the dusty floor. "The Thornwick brothers have controlled this territory for far too long. It's time for new leadership." "Your leadership?" Mira guessed. "Of course. My late husband left me considerable resources, but no heir to carry on his legacy. If I can eliminate the current Alpha line, the Pack Council will have no choice but to consider alternative candidates." The scarred woman released Mira's arm, backing away from Lady Evelyn with obvious fear. "You said you'd pay us when the job was done. And you said you could handle one injured commander." The lady's tone turned icy. "Instead, you've created a spectacle that will have every pack in the region asking questions." "We can still finish it," the leader insisted desperately. "Kill them both. Make it look like rogues acting alone." Too late for that. Lady Evelyn pulled a small silver pistol from her purse, the metal gleaming in the morning light. "There are too many witnesses now. Too many complications." The teenager's giggles died abruptly as he realized what was happening. "You're going to kill us too." "I'm going to clean up your mess." The lady's finger moved to the trigger. Nothing personal. Mira didn't think. She just moved. Years of avoiding pack politics had taught her to recognize when violence was about to explode, and she threw herself sideways just as the gun fired. The bullet shattered the stone wall where she'd been standing, sending chips of rock flying in all directions. The rogues scattered like startled birds, their earlier confidence replaced by desperate panic. The leader dove for the stairs, while the scarred woman leaped through a gap in the wall that led to the tower's outer ledge. Only the teenager remained frozen in place, his young face white with terror. Lady Evelyn turned the gun on him without hesitation. "Loose ends," she murmured. "No!" Mira grabbed the woman's arm, trying to force the weapon away from the terrified boy. They struggled for control, the gun wavering between them as their feet slipped on the loose stones. The sound of splintering wood came from below as Kael and his warriors finally breached the tower's entrance. Shouts and the clash of weapons echoed up the stairwell as the pack soldiers engaged the fleeing rogues, but it was too late to help with the fight happening in the upper room. Lady Evelyn was stronger than she looked, her grip on the pistol steady despite Mira's efforts to dislodge it. "Let go, you little fool. This is bigger than you understand." "I understand enough." Mira planted her feet and pulled harder, her omega strength surprising them both. "You're trying to destroy innocent people for power." "Innocent?" The lady laughed bitterly. "The Thornwick family has built their empire on the bones of weaker packs. They're no more innocent than I am." The gun went off again, the bullet burying itself in the wooden ceiling. Splinters rained down on them as they continued their deadly dance, neither willing to let go. The teenager had pressed himself against the wall, too frightened to run or help. "Mira!" Kael's voice roared from the stairwell. Much closer now. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stone steps, taking them 3 at a time. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened with desperation. If Kael reached them before she could eliminate the witnesses, her entire plan would crumble. She wrenched the gun toward Mira with sudden violence, her finger tightening on the trigger. But the shot never came. Instead, the teenager finally found his courage and tackled the noblewoman from behind, sending all 3 of them crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs and silk. The gun skittered across the stones, coming to rest just out of reach. Kael burst into the room at that moment, his sword drawn and his eyes blazing with alpha fury. Behind him came two of his warriors, their faces grim with battle readiness. They took in the scene at a glance. The elegant lady sprawled on the floor, the terrified teenage rogue, and Mira sitting in the middle of it all with dust in her hair and determination in her eyes. "Are you hurt?" Kael demanded, dropping to one knee beside Mira without taking his gaze off the potential threats. "I'm fine." Her voice was shakier than she'd expected, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. "But she's the one behind everything." "Lady Evelyn. She hired the rogues to kill you." Lady Evelyn struggled to her feet, her perfect composure finally cracking. "You have no proof of that accusation." "We have witnesses," one of Kael's warriors pointed out, nodding toward the teenage rogue who was still cowering against the wall. "The word of a rogue against a pack noble?" The lady smoothed her skirts with trembling hands. "I think not." But Kael was studying her with the calculating gaze of a trained investigator. "Lady Evelyn Blackwood, your husband died 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. You've been pushing for pack council representation ever since. Perfectly legal political ambition. Maybe. But this?" He gestured to the gun lying on the floor. "This is attempted murder." The lady's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold ambition underneath. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine." "Actually," Mira said quietly, getting to her feet with Kael's help, "it's not." She pulled out the small recording device she'd activated when she first heard hoofbeats approaching the tower, a precaution her foster mother had taught her years ago. The red light blinked steadily, indicating it had captured every word of their conversation. Lady Evelyn's face went white as she realized the implications. Her confession, her threats, her entire plot, all recorded in her own voice. "You clever little Omega," she whispered. But there was no longer any fight left in her. Kael's warriors moved forward to take her into custody, but she held up one trembling hand. "Wait. There's something else you need to know." "What?" Her smile was bitter as winter wind. "I wasn't working alone." The sound of breaking glass made everyone in the Alpha Prime study freeze. Mira jerked back from the window. She'd accidentally knocked over a crystal paperweight, her face burning red as the expensive piece shattered on the marble floor. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, dropping to her knees to gather the sharp pieces. "Leave it." Kael's voice was gentle but firm. "You'll cut yourself." Alpha Prime Marcus watched this exchange with interest, his fingers tapping against his massive oak desk. The room felt like a trap, with its dark leather chairs and golden wolf statues staring down from every corner. Mira had never been in a space that screamed power so loudly. "Sit down, Miss Caldwell," Marcus said, pointing to the chair across from him. "We have important things to discuss." Mira's hands shook as she sat. Her simple blue dress looked so out of place among all the fancy furniture. She could smell the expensive cologne both brothers wore, so different from the forest scents she knew. "3 days ago, my brother almost died," Marcus began, his gray eyes studying her face. "The silver poison should have killed him within an hour. Anyone would have helped," Mira said quietly. "Would they?" Kael moved away from the fireplace, his boots making soft sounds on the thick carpet. "When was the last time you saw an Omega help an Alpha warrior?" Mira thought about it. In her whole life, she couldn't remember a single time. Omegas stayed away from Alpha business. It was safer that way. "That's different," she said. "He was hurt." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what happened." So Mira told them everything. How she'd found Kael by the old oak tree, barely breathing. How his skin had felt cold and wrong. How she'd given him all her water, drop by drop, even though silver poison was dangerous to touch. "You carried him to shade," Kael added softly. "You stayed until you heard the search party coming. I couldn't just leave you there." The words came out stronger than she felt. "Why not?" Marcus asked. "It would have been easier, safer for you." Mira looked down at her hands. How could she explain that leaving someone to die felt worse than any punishment the pack might give her? Because it was wrong, she said finally. The silence stretched long enough to make her nervous. Marcus and Kael shared one of those looks that brothers have, full of meaning she couldn't read. The pack council met yesterday, Marcus said. They want to reward you. Mira's stomach dropped. Pack council meetings never meant good things for Omegas. What kind of reward? A house in the main compound. Protection. A job working with the healers. Marcus's voice was careful, like he was offering something precious. You'd never have to worry about food or safety again. It sounded too good to be true. Mira had learned that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually was. What do you want in return? Kael stepped closer to her chair. We want you to accept the protection we're offering. That's all? That's everything, Marcus said. Right now, you live alone on the edge of pack territory. No family, no mate, no one to speak for you if trouble comes. I've managed fine so far. Have you? Kael's question was gentle but pointed. When's the last time you had enough food for a whole week? When's the last time you felt completely safe? The questions hit harder than Mira expected. She thought about her tiny cottage with its leaky roof, about the nights she went to bed hungry because her small garden hadn't produced enough, about lying awake listening to strange sounds in the forest, hoping no rogues or rival pack members would find her alone. I don't need charity, she said, but her voice sounded small. It's not charity. Marcus stood up, walking around his desk to sit in the chair next to hers. You saved my brother's life. That creates a debt. I don't want anything from you. What do you want? Kael asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her what she wanted before. I want. She stopped, afraid to say it out loud. Tell us, Marcus encouraged. I want to matter. The words rushed out before she could stop them. I want to do something important. I want to help people and have them actually listen to me. Then accept our offer, Kael said. Work with the healers. You have good instincts and gentle hands. You could learn to save more lives than just mine. The idea sent a warm feeling through her chest. She'd always been good with hurt animals and sick pack members who came to her for unofficial help. But real healer training? That was for high-ranking wolves. The other Omegas would hate me, she said. They'd think I was putting on airs. Let us worry about that, Marcus said firmly. Your safety is our responsibility now. Since when? Another of those brother looks passed between them. Since you proved that rank doesn't matter when it comes to doing what's right, Kael said. Mira felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent her whole life being told she didn't matter because she was an Omega. Now, the two most powerful wolves in the pack were telling her the opposite. I need time to think about it, she said. Of course, Marcus smiled, and it changed his whole face. But don't think too long. Word is already spreading about what you did. Other packs are getting curious about the Omega who saved an Alpha Commander. A chill ran down Mira's spine. What does that mean? It means, Kael said quietly, that your quiet life is over whether you accept our protection or not. The knock on Mira's door came at midnight, sharp and demanding. She sat up in bed, heart hammering as she recognized the scent. Wolves she didn't know, and they smelled dangerous. Open up, little Omega, a rough voice called. We just want to talk. Mira grabbed the baseball bat she kept beside her bed and crept toward the window. 3 large shapes stood on her porch, and more waited in the shadows of her garden. Rogues, by their mixed scents, the kind of wolves who lived outside pack law. I know you're in there, the same voice said. The Alpha hero isn't here to protect you now. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. Before she could dial, a new sound made her freeze. The deep, threatening growl of an alpha wolf in full protective mode. You picked the wrong house. Kael's voice cut through the night like a blade. Commander Thornwick, the rogue leader said, and Mira could hear his fear. We didn't know you were here. I'm not here, Kael said, and Mira could picture his cold smile. But I'm watching, always watching. The sound of running feet told her the rogues were leaving fast. A soft tap on her door made her jump. "It's me," Kael said quietly. "You're safe now." Mira opened the door with shaking hands. He stood on her porch in dark clothes, looking like he'd appeared out of nowhere. "How did you know?" she whispered. "Guards," he said simply. "You've been watched since you left the compound today. I never saw anyone. You weren't supposed to." He stepped inside without being invited, his eyes checking every corner of her small living room. "Pack your things." "What?" "Tonight proved what we already knew. You can't stay here." His voice was gentle but firm. "They'll keep coming." Mira sank into her old armchair, suddenly feeling very small. Who were they? Rogues from the Shadow Claw pack. They think taking you will hurt us. Kael sat on her coffee table so they were eye to eye. They're wrong, but that won't stop them from trying. This is because I helped you. This is because you're important now. He reached out slowly, like she might run, and touched her hand. The story is spreading to other packs. The Omega who showed mercy to a dying Alpha. Some see it as weakness. Others see it as power. I don't feel powerful. Power isn't always about feeling strong, Kael said. Sometimes it's about doing the right thing when everyone else won't. Mira looked around her tiny cottage. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The thought of leaving made her chest tight. Where would I go? The main compound, under pack protection. His thumb moved across her knuckles. There's a small house near the healer's building. Private, but safe. And then what? I hide forever? Then you learn to be who you're meant to be. His gray eyes were intense. The healers want to train you. You could help save lives, not just mine. What if I'm not good enough? You saved an Alpha commander with nothing but water and stubbornness, Kael said, almost smiling. I think you can handle whatever they teach you. A crash from outside made them both freeze. Kael was on his feet instantly, moving toward the window with deadly grace. More rogues? Mira whispered. Different scent. His voice was tight. Blood Moon Pack. Mira's stomach dropped. Everyone knew about the Blood Moon Pack. They were the kind of wolves other wolves told scary stories about. Why would they come here? Because they want you. Kael pulled out his phone, typing fast. Marcus, we have a problem. The response came immediately. On our way. How many? Mira asked, hating how her voice shook. Too many. Kael moved away from the window. We need to leave. Now. But my things can be replaced. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back door. Your life can't. They slipped out through her small garden, Kael's body tense and ready for a fight. In the distance, Mira could hear wolves howling, the sound every pack member learned to fear. This way, Kael whispered, leading her toward the forest. There's a safe path to the compound. How do you know? Because I've been planning for this since the day you saved me. They moved through the trees like shadows, Kael's hand warm and steady in hers. Every stick that cracked under their feet made Mira's heart race faster. Stop. A new voice called from ahead of them. We know you're there. 3 wolves stepped out from behind the trees, bigger and meaner looking than the rogues. The leader smiled, showing too many teeth. Hello, little Omega, he said. We've been looking for you. Kael stepped in front of Mira, and she could feel the change in him, the careful control slipping away as his wolf rose to the surface. Touch her and die, he said simply. Big words for 1 Alpha against 3. The leader laughed. Who said he was alone? Marcus's voice came from behind them, strong and commanding. Suddenly the forest was full of pack warriors, surrounding the Blood Moon wolves. Mira had never been so happy to see the Alpha Prime in her life. This isn't over, the Blood Moon leader snarled as his wolves backed away. Yes, it is, Marcus said coldly. Spread the word. Anyone who threatens her threatens the entire Thornwick pack. As the enemy wolves disappeared into the darkness, Mira realized everything had changed. There was no going back to her quiet life now. Come on, Kael said gently, his hand finding hers again. Let's go home. Home. The word sounded different when he said it, full of promise and safety she'd never known before. The scream that tore from the forest made every wolf in the compound freeze. Mira dropped her teacup, the ceramic shattering against the stone floor as her wolf clawed frantically beneath her skin. Something was very, very wrong. "Stay here," Kael commanded, already shifting into battle mode as warriors poured from the buildings around them. But Mira was already running, her bare feet slapping against the cold ground as she followed the terrible sounds echoing from the tree line. What she found made her stomach turn to ice. 3 rival pack wolves had surrounded a small girl, maybe 7 years old, who cowered behind a fallen log. The child's scent hit Mira like a punch to the gut. Omega, a lost Omega pup, with no protection and no pack to claim her. "Please don't hurt me," the little girl whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. The largest rival wolf laughed, a sound that made Mira's skin crawl. "Look what we found wandering on Shadowmere land. A little spy, maybe? Or just a snack?" Mira stepped into the clearing before her brain could catch up with her body. "She's just a child." All 3 wolves spun toward her, their eyes lighting up with cruel interest. The leader, a massive brute with scarred hands and yellow teeth, grinned wider. "Well, well. The famous Omega who thinks she can play with alphas? Marcus Blackthorn sends his regards." Her blood turned to ice water. Marcus Blackthorn led the most vicious pack in the territory, known for taking Omega slaves, and worse. If they were here, it wasn't random. This was planned. "The child has nothing to do with pack business," Mira said, stepping protectively in front of the trembling girl. "Let her go." "Funny thing about Omegas," the scarred wolf said, circling them like a predator. "You always think your softness matters, but all it does is make you easy targets." The attack came without warning. Mira threw herself sideways, grabbing the little girl and rolling behind another fallen tree, just as claws raked the air where they'd been standing. The child clung to her, sobbing quietly into her shoulder. "When I say run," Mira whispered urgently, "you run toward the big buildings and scream for Commander Kael. Can you do that?" The girl nodded against her neck, small body shaking like a leaf. But before Mira could give the signal, a new voice cut through the clearing like a blade. "Touch either of them, and I'll paint this forest with your blood." Kael stood at the edge of the trees, and Mira had never seen him look more dangerous. His wolf pressed so close to the surface that his eyes glowed silver, and the air around him practically hummed with lethal energy. Behind him, she could see other Shadowmere warriors spreading through the forest like shadows. "Commander Thornwick," the scarred wolf said, but his confident tone had faltered. "We were just having a friendly chat with your Omega." "Friendly?" Kael's voice was deadly quiet. "Is that what you call threatening children? The pup was trespassing. The pup is under my protection, as is my mate." The word rang through the clearing like a bell, and Mira felt something shift inside her chest. "Which means you've just declared war on both." What happened next was too fast for human eyes to follow. One moment the 3 rival wolves were standing confidently in the clearing. The next they were flat on their backs, with Shadowmere warriors holding silver blades to their throats. Kael moved like lightning-made flesh, and within seconds he was kneeling beside Mira and the trembling child. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over both of them, checking for injuries with gentle thoroughness that made her heart ache. "We're okay," Mira managed, though her voice shook. They were going to hurt her. Kael's jaw tightened as he looked down at the little girl, who was still clinging to Mira like a lifeline. "What's your name, little one?" "Emma," the child whispered. "My mama said to find the nice Omega if something bad happened. She said you would keep me safe." Mira's breath caught. "Your mother knew about me?" Emma nodded seriously. "All the Omegas know. Mama said you're the one who made things different, who showed everyone that we matter too." The weight of those words settled over Mira like a cloak. Somehow, without even knowing it, she'd become more than just Kael's mate. She'd become a symbol, hope for Omegas who had never dared to dream of anything more than survival. "We need to find her mother," Mira said, looking up at Kael. His expression was grim. "The Blackthorn pack doesn't leave loose ends. if they took the time to threaten the child. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. They both knew what it meant. Then she stays with us, Mira said firmly, her wolf rising to the surface with protective fury. No child should face this world alone. Kael studied her face, and she saw the exact moment he fell even deeper in love with her. The pack will need to vote, taking in a stray pup, especially an Omega. Then we'll make them understand. Mira stood up, Emma still in her arms, and faced the assembled warriors who had gathered to witness the confrontation. This is what leadership means. Protecting those who can't protect themselves, proving that strength isn't about who you can destroy, but who you choose to save. A murmur ran through the watching wolves. She could see some nodding, others looking uncertain. But in Kael's eyes, she saw nothing but pride and love, so fierce it took her breath away. "You heard my mate," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "The child is under Shadowmere protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, from somewhere in the crowd of warriors, someone began to clap. Slowly, other hands joined in, until the entire clearing rang with approval. Emma lifted her head from Mira's shoulder, looking around with wide, wondering eyes. "Are they happy?" she asked in her tiny voice. Mira smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart. They're very happy." As Kael's arm came around both of them, pulling them close against his chest, Mira realized something profound had just happened. She hadn't just saved a child. She'd helped birth a new kind of pack, one where protection extended to everyone, where Omega voices mattered, where love was stronger than tradition. But in the distance, she could hear howls echoing through the forest. The Blackthorn Pack's response to their failed mission. This was far from over. The wedding preparations had turned the entire compound upside down, but in the best possible way. Mira stood in front of the full-length mirror, in what would soon be her and Kael's shared quarters, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The dress was simple, but beautiful, cream-colored silk that flowed like water around her curves, with delicate beadwork that caught the morning light. Emma, who had become her shadow over the past month, sat cross-legged on the bed behind her, carefully braiding wildflowers into a crown. "You look like a princess," Emma announced, with the serious authority that only 7-year-olds possessed. "Kael's going to faint when he sees you." Mira laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. "Alphas don't faint, sweetheart. This one might. He gets all googly-eyed whenever you walk into a room." Emma giggled. "Marcus told me he walked into a door yesterday because he was watching you instead of looking where he was going." The mention of Marcus, Alpha Prime Marcus, who had become surprisingly fond of Emma and treated her like the little sister he'd never had, made Mira smile. The pack's acceptance of both her and Emma had been easier than she'd ever dreamed possible. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. To her surprise, it wasn't one of the Omega women who'd been helping her prepare. Instead, Kael's mother stepped into the room, carrying a small wooden box that looked ancient. "Mrs. Thornwick," Mira said, suddenly nervous. Kael's mother was a formidable woman who'd taken some time to warm up to the idea of her youngest son mating an Omega with no family connections. "Elena," the older woman corrected gently, "we're going to be family in about an hour. I think you can use my first name." She set the box on the dressing table and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in faded silk, was the most beautiful necklace Mira had ever seen. Silver and moonstone, with an intricate wolf design that seemed to move in the light. "This has been passed down through Thornwick women for 12 generations, Elena said softly. "I wore it when I married Marcus's father. His grandmother wore it before me. And now, if you'll accept it, it's yours." Mira's throat closed up. "Elena, I can't. It's too precious. And I'm just—" "You're the woman my son loves more than his own life," Elena interrupted firmly. "You're the Omega who saved him when no one else would have dared. You're the female who's already changing our pack for the better." making us remember what it means to protect the vulnerable, instead of just dominating them. She lifted the necklace with careful hands. You're exactly the kind of woman this necklace was meant for. With trembling fingers, Mira lifted her hair, while Elena fastened the clasp. The pendant settled perfectly at the base of her throat, as if it had always belonged there. There, Elena said, stepping back with satisfaction. Now you look like a Thornwick. Emma bounced off the bed to examine the necklace, her eyes wide with admiration. It's so pretty. And look, the wolf looks just like Kael when he shifts. Another knock interrupted them, this one more urgent. Mira? Marcus's voice came through the door. We need you out here, now. The three women exchanged alarmed looks. Elena opened the door to find Marcus standing in the hallway, his face grim. What's wrong? She demanded. Blackthorn pack warriors at the territory border, Marcus said tersely. They're carrying a white flag, asking for parley. They want to speak with Mira specifically. Mira's blood turned cold. On my wedding day? That can't be a coincidence. Definitely not. Marcus's jaw was tight with controlled anger. Kael's already suiting up. He's not happy. I bet he isn't. Mira looked down at her wedding dress, then at Emma's worried face. How long do we have? They said they'll wait until noon for an answer. After that, they consider our silence a declaration of war. Mira glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:30. Her wedding was supposed to start in 30 minutes. Emma, stay with Elena, she said, already moving toward her closet to find something more practical than silk and lace. Mira, no. Elena caught her arm. You don't have to do this. Let Marcus and Kael handle it. They specifically asked for me. Mira pulled out a simple green dress and sturdy boots. That means whatever they want. It's connected to me somehow. I can't hide behind my mate and his brother, while people I care about might be in danger. She changed clothes quickly. The wedding dress carefully hung back up for later, because there would be a later, she told herself firmly. There had to be. When she emerged from the compound 10 minutes later, she found Kael waiting with a full battle contingent. His face was a mask of controlled fury, but his eyes softened when they landed on her. You don't have to do this, he said, echoing his mother's words. Yes, I do. She stood on her toes to kiss him quickly, tasting his worry and determination. We do this together, or not at all. The ride to the border felt both endless and too short. When they crested the hill that overlooked the meeting ground, Mira's heart sank. At least 50 Blackthorn warriors waited below, far too many for a simple parley. But it was the figure standing in front of them that made her wolf snarl with recognition and rage. Marcus Blackthorn himself, the pack leader whose reputation for cruelty was matched only by his hunger for power. Well, well, Blackthorn called out as they approached. The famous Omega bride, coming to her own wedding negotiation. How romantic. State your business, Kael said coldly, positioning his horse protectively between Mira and the rival Alpha. My business is with your mate, Commander, though I suppose you can listen if you'd like. Blackthorn's smile was all teeth and malice. I have a proposition for the little Omega who thinks she can change the world. I'm listening, Mira said, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Join my pack willingly, and I'll spare everyone you care about. Refuse, and I'll take you anyway, but first I'll burn your precious compound to the ground and kill every Omega in it, starting with that little girl you've adopted. The threat hit her like a physical blow. Around her, she could hear the Shadowmere warriors shifting restlessly, hands moving to weapons, but she also knew they were outnumbered, and that Blackthorn was exactly the kind of monster who would follow through on his threats. Why? She asked, stalling for time while her mind raced through possibilities. What could you possibly want with me? You've become a symbol, little Omega. Hope for the weak. Inspiration for the downtrodden. His expression turned ugly. Bad for business, if you know what I mean. Much easier to control Omegas who know their place. And if I agree to come with you? Mira, no. Kael's voice was a low growl of warning. Blackthorn chuckled. Smart male. He knows exactly what I'd do to you. But at least the others would live to remember you fondly. The silence stretched between the two groups like a knife's edge. Mira could feel everyone waiting for her answer, could sense Kael's desperate need to fight warring with his love for her and desire to keep her safe. Then Emma's small voice echoed in her memory. All the Omegas know. Mama said you're the one who made things different. Mira straightened in her saddle, lifting her chin with quiet defiance. I have a counter offer. Blackthorn raised an eyebrow. Oh? Single combat. You and me. Winner takes all. The rival Alpha threw back his head and laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You? Fight me? Little Omega, I could break you with one hand. Maybe, Mira agreed calmly. But if you're so confident, what's the harm in accepting? Unless you're afraid that losing to an Omega would destroy your precious reputation. The laughter died instantly. Around them, warriors from both packs held their breath. Fine, Blackthorn snarled. But when I win, I take you and burn your compound anyway. Can't have witnesses to what comes next. Mira smiled, and it was sharp as winter wind. When I win, you and your pack leave Shadowmere territory forever. And you spread the word to every pack within 500 miles that Omegas are under our protection. All of them. Deal. Blackthorn dismounted, already shifting into his massive black wolf form. Mira slipped from her horse, meeting Kael's desperate eyes one last time. Trust me, she whispered. Then she shifted, her wolf emerging with predatory grace. She was smaller than Blackthorn's wolf, yes, but she was also faster, smarter, and fighting for everything she loved. The battle was brutal but brief. What Blackthorn hadn't counted on was that an Omega who'd spent her life surviving had learned skills no pampered Alpha ever needed. When the dust settled, he lay defeated in the dirt, her jaws at his throat. Yield, she growled. I yield, he gasped. When Mira shifted back to human form, she was still wearing Elena's necklace. The moonstone caught the afternoon sun like a beacon, and she knew that every Omega within 100 miles would hear about this day. Now get off our land, she said quietly, and remember your promise. As the Blackthorn pack retreated, Kael swept her into his arms, spinning her around while their warriors cheered. When he finally set her down, his eyes were bright with tears, and pride and love so fierce it took her breath away. Ready to get married, Mrs. Thornwick? He asked. Mira laughed, wild and free, and utterly happy. I've been ready since the day I gave you water. Their wedding that evening was the most beautiful celebration the compound had ever seen. And when Emma walked down the aisle ahead of her, scattering flower petals and grinning like sunshine, Mira knew that everything, every struggle, every fear, every moment of doubt had led to this perfect beginning. As Kael slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her until the stars burned out, Mira realized something wonderful. Sometimes, the greatest adventures start with the smallest acts of kindness. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really could change the world.